The next on a similar theme about our opponent is we compete against ourselves. This is a huge, huge deal. We've talked about it before in a number of ways. We talked about this is Frosty's line, people come to beat us, we come to be us. That's just a stereotypical, understandable thing, is that people are trying to win and they're trying to beat you. And we're simply saying that's a board game we're not going to play with them. We're going to play with them to play against ourselves, to try to find our very best self. We compete against ourselves. We try to close the gap of our potential and our performance personally and corporately. This is our way of staying in the zone. You see that even in sports psychology, generally at the college and the professional level. Some coaches have embraced that sense that we need to be aware strategically of what the opponent's doing, but we're not playing them. We're doing what we well, and we're doing what we do best. And there will be nuances of adjustments schematically and et cetera to the opponent, but we realize this is about us. This is not about them, but once again, we have to have a them for there to be a game. And that goes back to the previous thought about the opponent is our partner in competition. He's not the enemy. He is the opponent, but he's not the enemy. Comparing ourselves to others inhibits performance. This is such a legitimate truth that's even recognized in sports psychology. I've used this, I think, in the course in a previous clip, is you can't always be the best. You can't always do your best, but you can always give it your best shot. Your best shot, we say this, the opponent is you. It's not the team on the other side of the court, per se, or the field or the other bench. You're the opponent. It's true even in Christianity, isn't it? I mean, our battle is not against flesh and blood, against demonic forces, but the battle also is against our own flesh, our own old nature. Our old man, we call that biblically. In that same way, Satan can't make us sin. We sin because we choose to. He can incite us, he can invite us, he can influence, but it's our decision. It's our decision to obey. It's our decision to disobey. That's what we call the doctrine of personal responsibility, which falls in line with the doctrine of the depravity of man. That man in his core nature, before he's redeemed, is lost. His old nature is dead. And so Jesus, you become born again, right? You were born in flesh, but you're dead in the spirit, and then you're born in the spirit. You're born again. This philosophy is really about being born again, philosophically, in how to view competition. Because competition was about us and them, and now it's about us. We're striving with them and not against them. Competition used to be, I'm against my teammate at my position because I want to play and I want him. I can remember wanting my teammates at my position to fail so that I could play. Think about that. When you extrapolate that out, can you imagine what kind of culture that creates in a team? When inherently people are trying to beat each other out. And then somehow magically when it comes to opponent, they're going to be for somebody they've been against for 300 days that year. Frankly, 355 days, other than the 10 games or so if you're at football or whatever the amount of games in basketball and other sports. Does that make sense? It's so crazy to me that you when you're self-absorbed and selfish, you want to play, and you frankly, compared to your friend who's on your team at your position, he's your enemy because he's stealing your playing time. Picture this. And somehow you want to have intimacy and camaraderie? You think you're going to have a put-up game when your opponent makes a great play in practice or he's beating you? Because if I encourage him and he gets better, then that means that lessens the chance I play, and I want to play. So since I want to play, I need him to fail. I need either me to play greater than him, comparison game, or I need him to fail so the coach will think I'm better, comparison game. The comparison game is a no-win game. Everybody loses. Everybody in the long run loses in the comparison game. It's what we call a no-win. There are double wins where we both win, and there's no wins where nobody wins. It's a no-win situation. When you're against your teammate and against your teammates, this is normative stuff out there, right? That they want to have competition between the offense and defense. How many times have we heard that the offense is mad at the defense or the defense is mad at the offense because the offense can't score and the defense is carrying the brunt of the team? So you're going to tap into supernatural energy when you're cursing, slandering, gossiping, speaking ill of, discouraging, or not encouraging your teammates because they're on the other side of the ball? That's insanity. You think somehow you're going to maximize team ability when you want people on your own team to fail, and then magically you want them to be your friend when you're in a game? You think you can flip that switch? You can't sustain that. And that will steal synergy. Synergy is 1 + 1 = 3, or 5, or 100. That's synergy. Scriptures even talk about that supernatural synergy. 1 puts to flight 1,000, and 2 put to flight 10,000. That's synergy. Wouldn't 1 put to flight 1,000, and 2 put to flight 2,000, and 3? No. In the synergy, in the multiplying power of God, 5 loaves and 2 fish feed 20,000 people. That's the power of God. When the power of God touches an individual, he becomes something more and different than he was before. He closes his gap at some level that's freakily unique and sustainable and reproducible and multipliable. That's what the power of God does. When he touches stuff, it blows up in a good way when it's tied with obedience. This is the power that comes from the opponent is not the enemy, he's our friend. This is the power that comes from we compete against our own best self, individually and corporately. Comparing ourselves to others inhibits our performance because we either think too much of ourselves because we're starting and they're not, or too little of ourselves because they're starting and we're not. We speak then ill of them or think of them poorly. How normal is it for starters and stars to look down on guys that don't play, that are too young or too immature or too untalented or less talented, right? How natural is it on teams for the starters or the stars or the upperclassmen to want to serve the underclassmen versus haze them or prank them, right? Just think of the natural order of man. Think of what the world was from the beginning. It's why there had to be a flood, because people were a lord unto themselves, and they weren't submitted to a higher authority that could bring and create order for them. And he had to wipe everybody out except just one little family unit and start over. I mean, this is the doctrine of the depravity of man playing out in sports, and what sport does is it heightens the good and it heightens the bad of man. It accelerates, it accentuates all the darkest and all the best of mankind. And through the Spirit of God, we can, as we surrender to him, he harnesses that stallion, that creation, so that it can be order and powerful, and bless and not curse. Closing the potential performance gap is what we're about in competing against ourselves. This is such a huge deal. Huge deal. It's putting to death your flesh to bless your teammate so that he can become all he wants to be. In the culture of this philosophy, people are there to serve each other. The upperclassmen serve the underclassmen. Teammates serve each other. I alluded to this before. In pre-practice and pro-practice, when people are in the right mindset. Again, their mind isn't right naturally, they set it. We talk about that with the thermostat. You set your level of play, which doesn't have to do with outcomes, has to do with process. Clear mind, strong will, great passion, a whole heart. You give everything you can in those moments, moment by moment, play after play. You stay in the moment, to use sports psychology terms. You stay in the zone. You make a decision to set the thermostat versus be a thermometer, like James talks about, a wave and sea blown and tossed by the wind. This is all part of the byproduct of the philosophy, is all these sports psychology terms come into play because, frankly, some of them are biblical. And when practiced, the principles and the commandments of God, these are the byproducts and the results of it. That our teammates are blessed because we're there to serve them and not to beat them out. I know there's a culture out there where they want to increase competition within teams because they're trying to develop competitors. But when I think about that, I think, can you imagine, and in that culture, whether it's wide receivers on one-on-one or tackling drills, where they then taunt and mock each other, how can that create unity? They forfeit the opportunity to have supernatural unity because somebody who's your teammate, who just beat you, is now mocking you with his words or actions, which should motivate you in their model to want to be better. And again, fear is a great motivator. Hate's a great motivator. It's just not sustainable, and there's no transferability beyond the field. At the field, I would contend it's unsustainable because you're not going to want to play and die for somebody who you hate because he humiliates and embarrasses you. And you're not going to bless him or want him to succeed because he's so arrogant that you'd rather he fail somehow. This is the opposite of what you want to create. There's a misunderstanding that in that culture, it will produce results just like dictators can produce results and fear can produce results. But it's not sustainable. It's not eternal. Does not glorify God. Does not enhance the experience. Does not create enjoyment for the trip. And it is not transferable outside of the grass. That's going to be a bad plan with your wife or husband. It's going to be a bad plan. When you want to win, when you've been in a culture that your goal is to beat and defeat everybody, you think that doesn't bleed out into your relationships? You think that guy's going to automatically now be a guy who wants to serve and die to himself? When with ferocity in the sport world, he's attempted to feed the monster of I want to be number one, and now you're going to be number none? You're just going to flip back and forth between I want to be number one and I'll do whatever it takes, and now you're going to be number none to do whatever it takes to serve and die to yourself for your wife or kids, in particular when they don't obey you or you don't feel like it's fair or she or he is unlovely to you. You're going to say, not my will, but yours be done? I mean, that's insanity. That's insanity. Next point. This is one that this is a kind of a male articulation. And I'm going to share it as a male articulation. It's not crass, but really it is part of our thinking and part of my articulation, frankly, as a kickback to the world that looks at this philosophy in ignorance and thinks we don't care about playing hard, or we don't care about winning and losing, or we don't care about stuff that is all they care about. And so our comment is this: we only ask for one simple thing of ourselves and of our players, every last drop of our blood. I say that to my players. I say it tongue-in-cheek, but I want them to get the principle. I'm going to lead the way in coaching you or loving you with a whole heart, a clear mind, great passion, and I forget it there. Whole heart, strong will, great passion. Yeah, you got it. I'm forgetting it. That's what I'm going to do in leadership. And that's what I want to do with my family. That's my target. That's what I'm aiming for, right? Doesn't mean I'll hit it, but if you don't aim for it, you for sure ain't going to hit it. If you aim for it, your chances increase that you'll hit it and hit it more often. And so we're asking for complete and total commitment as appropriate. Don't take this weirdly. Within the context of the sport or the situation, the practice, the game, the walkthrough, the preparation. We want it all. We're leading the way in dying to ourselves to bless you, and we're asking you to reciprocate that. Coaches lead the way with players. Players lead the way with each other. Again, this is something you aim for. It's a hypothetical model. It's an ideal. It's perfection, which, if you want to be realistic, is unrealistic. But I would contend, one of those lines, if you shoot for the stars and you miss, at least you hit the moon. I mean, there's some truth to that. That's why we say have high expectations and do not apologize for that. Just make sure it's tempered with high grace so people don't feel oppressed by the expectations from those who are in leadership. And so they lead the way in service. They lead the way in dying to themselves. Jesus came to serve, not to be served, and gave his life. He died first. He went first. He simply said, follow me to the cross. And through the cross, through suffering, learn obedience to glorify God and advance the kingdom. This is his calling, and it's our calling to follow, to learn from him. That's what a disciple is. He's a learner. He's a follower. He's an apprentice. He's practicing what he's seen and heard. That's the call of us. And for those of us in leadership and sport, this is what we're committed to philosophically when we're in position of leadership, whether that's coach to coach or coach to player or player to player, or inner circle to outer circle. Outer circle, again, being fans and family and those people that are observing that aren't part of the inside of the competitive team or program experience. So we want maximal effort in all things at all times. As a principle, this is a big, big, big deal. It's a big deal. It's the right thing. I already in the beginning shared all those Bible verses about whatever you do, word or deed, whole heart, for Jesus' sake, according to his word, by his power, for his glory. I mean, he said it, 15 different ways. He was serious about that. And it's not just true in your walk. We'll talk later, I think, about competence, and I need to address that because of how the world responds and respects competence. And it's one of the tremendous lies that we're trying to defeat about this kind of philosophy, that we don't care about outcomes. It's not that we don't care about outcomes. We just care infinitely more about God's glory. That's all we're saying. We care a lot about outcomes and we don't care at all. Well, what do you? Do you care or you not care? Yes. We care a lot and we don't care at all. I'm going to address it right now just because I'm on it. I think I've used this before in a previous clip, but the scriptures say, hate father, mother, sister, brother, wife, and children for the sake of Christ. And this is a fundamental principle. And I think I said about it before. I'm going to say it again now, and I'm probably going to say it before the end of this course again, because this has to be understood. We call it the doctrine of both, two things that exist simultaneously that appear to be in conflict, but somehow supernaturally fit. Is Jesus God or is he man? What's the answer? Both. He's both and. He's not God one day and man the next. He's not 50-50 or 90-10. He's 100% of both at the same time. Now, we just accept that because we've heard that. But it's impossible. It's only possible in the supernatural that something could be 200% of something, because 100% is the maximum. And so when God says, hate mother, father, sister, brother, wife, and children, that's an actual verse. For the sake of Christ, he's not saying hate him. We know that from the pool of verses that say the opposite. Why then would he say that one time? Because he's trying to contrast the quantity and the quality of love meant for him, our first love, compared to those things on this planet that we're most commanded and called to love. He's showing a contrast. I don't want you to hate your wife or husband and children, but compared to your love for me, it's as if you do. Love them both, but the comparison is as opposite and polarized as possible. That's our position on the scoreboard in winning, in a nutshell. I want to win. I like to win. Even if I am unhealthy in my attitude in this philosophy, I'd prefer winning over losing. Wouldn't you? This is the conundrum. But here's what you have to understand. Even as I love to win and love to have success, compared to glorifying God, it's as if I hate it. Does that make sense? I put to death this desire that I have naturally, not because in and of itself it's evil, but because it wants to steal and kill and destroy the thing that matters infinitely more, and that's God's glory. I want God glorified. And compared to being successful or winning, it's as if I hate it because I want his will, not my will. Jesus said, I'd like to live here for the record, Father, if there's any way we could forego this crucifixion, this is my request. Nevertheless, not my will be, but yours be done. He acknowledged his humanity, and he submitted it to the sovereignty and the will of the Father. This is one of the ways we articulate winning. I want to win and I don't want to win at all. Well, which do you? Both. Both. But compared to glorifying God, I hate winning. I hate outcomes. Frankly, I hate outcomes because they steal the joy and the love and the peace and the process. And they steal my ability to focus on process because to every degree I get emotionally and mentally entwined in the scoreboard. I lose the commitment and the passion and the focus and intensity necessary in the process to close the gap between my potential and my performance. This is what I've found. This is what I've observed. This is what is clear. Crystal clear. I want God's glory. Hebrews 11 is about men and women saying, not our will, but yours be done. To some he said, this is your outcome, life. To others he said, this is your outcome, torture and death. But because earth wasn't our home, because heaven is our home, he knew that whatever the cost and price, no matter how difficult and painful and full of suffering this planet might have, it is a drop in a bucket. It's less than that. It's less than a dot on a page of a continuum that runs Alpha and Omega for eternity in both directions. This is the cost and the price. It's less than inconsequential. And so, in that vast gap between God's will and our natural man, is the vastness of the gap of our love for God versus love for our spouses and children. Is the vast gap between our wanting God's glory and our wanting to win. And what we found is human nature is compelled and drawn to self-glory and self-absorption and our success to the loss of others. And we're trying to put that to death so that God might be glorified in and through us. And the last vestiges of selfishness, self-will, self-preservation, self-glory can be put to death. Putting something to death is an action, an exercise of the will. And what we have found is unless you exercise your will to put to death outcomes in the scoreboard, you will be drawn there by natural man, and it will steal, kill, and destroy the process.